All right. So have you ever like scrolled through Instagram and seen those incredible food photos? You know, the ones that are like almost too pretty to eat?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The kind of food that looks like it belongs in a museum or something.
Right. And it gets you thinking, like, does food actually taste better when it looks amazing? Or is it really all about just, you know, the pure flavor? That's what we're going to be diving into today.
I think it's a really interesting question because on one hand, you've got this like minimalist approach to food, right? Where it's all about simple, high quality ingredients.
Yeah, like just letting the natural flavors speak for themselves.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, you have this, super visually driven style, like over the top presentations, edible flowers, all that.
Which, I mean, let's be honest, it can be pretty amazing to look at.
Totally.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what's more important, the taste or the visual experience?
Well, to kind of set the stage for this, we're going to be looking at a couple of different perspectives on this. Sort of the minimalist approach versus that really elaborate presentation style.
Sounds good.
So when we talk about minimalist cooking, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, I think a good way to picture it is to think about like a classic caprese salad. You know, you got those juicy tomatoes, fresh mozzarella, a little bit of basil.
Oh, yeah. Simple and delicious.
Exactly. Or like a perfectly grilled steak, you know, with just salt and pepper. The whole idea is to really let the quality of the ingredients shine through.
So it's like less is more kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's about focusing on those core flavors and not kind of, muddying them up with too many extra things.
Makes sense. And then on the flip side, you've got, I guess, what we'd call the over-the-top style, right?
Yeah. So this is where things get a little more, shall we say, creative. It's where, like, chefs are really trying to create an entire experience, not just with the taste, but also with, how the food looks.
So we're talking like those super intricate dishes you see in those fancy restaurants.
Totally. With the towers of food and the swirls of sauce and maybe even like dry ice for a little bit of drama.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, though, like, does all of that, I guess, fussiness actually make the food taste better?
It's funny you should ask that because there's actually been some research on this, and it turns out that there might be something to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was this study done at Oxford University, and they found that people actually rated the same dish as tasting better when it was presented in a more visually appealing way.
So basically, our eyes can kind of trick our taste buds.
In a way, yeah. It seems like when we see something that looks beautiful, our brains kind of anticipate that it's going to be a more enjoyable experience overall. And that can actually influence how we perceive the taste.
Wow. That's pretty fascinating. But I mean, I can totally understand why someone might prefer that more minimalist approach, right? Like if you're all about just, that pure, clean flavor.
Oh, absolutely. And there's definitely something to be said for that. Like a perfectly ripe peach straight from the tree doesn't really need anything else, right?
Exactly. It's perfect on its own.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a lot of, I guess, personal preference involved here.
For sure. And, practicality also plays a role too. Like when you're cooking at home on a busy weeknight, you're probably not going to have the time or energy to create some elaborate masterpiece.
No, for sure. I mean, sometimes it's just about getting dinner on the table.
Right. But that doesn't mean you can't still be intentional about how you present your food, even if it's something simple, like just taking a few extra seconds to, arrange things nicely on the plate can make a big difference.
Yeah, I think presentation can definitely make a meal feel more special.
For sure. And it can also, affect how people experience the food. Like, think about it. If you're having a romantic dinner, you're probably going to put a little more effort into the presentation than if you're just having a casual meal with friends.
Yeah, totally. Kind of sets the mood, right?
Absolutely. And, speaking of mood, I think it's worth mentioning that food presentation can also tie into tradition and, cultural norms.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, like, in some cultures, food presentation is all about simplicity and letting the ingredients speak for themselves.
Sort of like that minimalist approach we were talking about.
Right. But in other cultures, it's more about abundance and, really showcasing the artistry of the chef.
Yeah, I can see that. And then, of course, you can't talk about food presentation these days without mentioning social media.
Oh, absolutely. Social media has had a huge impact on how we think about food and how we present it.
Like, I feel like everyone's trying to get that perfect Instagram shot of their meal now.
Yeah, totally. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be really inspiring to see all the creative things people are doing with food, but it can also, put a lot of pressure on people to create these like super elaborate dishes, even if it's not really their style.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like you don't want to feel like you're not keeping up with the trends or something.
Right. But, at the end of the day, I think it's important to remember that the most important thing is that you enjoy the food you're eating.
And it's also important to consider things like accessibility and cost.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of those really elaborate dishes can require a lot of specialty ingredients, which can be expensive and hard to find.
Not to mention time consuming. I mean, who has hours to spend on a single dish?
Right. So I think it's important to find a balance between creativity and practicality, especially for those of us who are cooking at home.
Totally. But regardless of your budget or skill level, it's clear that presentation plays a role both in home cooking and fine dining.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting to think about how the emphasis on visual presentation might be changing our relationship with food, especially in the age of social media. Are we becoming more focused on how food looks than on how it actually tastes?
That's a good question, and one that we'll leave for our listeners to ponder. But at the end of the day, I think it's safe to say that both taste and presentation are important aspects of the dining experience.
Definitely. And finding that balance between the two is what makes cooking so much fun.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of minimalist versus over-the-top food presentation. We hope it's given you some food for thought. Until next time.